consumer payment types are being used all over the world. But saying that these are the blended rates, and in a geographical region, you will see that there will be a kind of a variance of these kind of rates. So cash, which is being used by the 30% of the global pairs, I think me and most of the people in this meeting today, we definitely use cash for some purpose or the other. Prepaid, I think most of you have come across in case of your travel cards. In terms of your gift cards, these are all called the prepaid cards. ACH is being used by 12% of the pairs. These numbers are increasing with open banking and everything. These numbers are increasing. Checks are being used for the 7% of the this thing by the pairs. This is something which is on the fall. Credit cards are being used by 20% of the this thing of the people of the pairs, and debit cards are being used by 12% of the pairs, and 18% of the pairs use the wallets. Again, this is against kind of a blended rate. For example, like in Asia Pacific, if you look at the Southeast Asia, wallet has got a bigger penetration. And some of the main wallet types are your WeChat Pay, Alipay. I mean, the emergence of the wallet itself is in Southeast Asia, and that's how it has gone to different other parts of the world. If you look at the debit card and all those kind of payments, this is primarily in South Asia, and you will also find quite a bit of it in Europe. Credit card, it is being used, but primary focus of credit card usage is in North America. Excuse me. Checks are being used by, I mean, globally, I think everywhere. ACH also is being used by primarily the South Asians, the Southeast Asians, the Europeans. The US kind of uses ACH in a much more smaller way. Prepaid, I think whoever uses travel cards and whoever travels takes a prepaid card, and cash is something which is kind of a no-brainer. I think everyone who has got no other way to pay a beneficiary, they use the cash. Next slide, please. Whereas this is the consumer payment behavior, the business payments is significantly different. The business payment is defined as there is one business paying into another business. The previous slide was basically a consumer paying to a business, and here we are talking about a business being paying to another business. So whatever you're seeing there is not what, like those methods may not be the right methods over here. So just going through this particular slide, cash is basically what you use in a corporate, which is called the petty cash. Prepaid, not much of being used now, but I know a couple of fintech who are coming on with all this virtual commercial prepaid kind of a model through which they're using prepaid for using commercial payments. ACH is being used the biggest for intercontinental payments or within the country payments or cross-border payments. Everywhere, like the corporates pay another corporate using ACH. Checks are about 7%. Credit cards are about 1%. That is basically the, I mean, you use another commercial card or especially under the commercial cards, I think are the only kind of credit cards which you pay for business. Debit cards also, it's basically only 1% of the pairs in the commercial world. And the wallets are being used by 10% of this population. But again, the commercial payments wallets are primarily in Southeast Asia. And especially if I have to promote, I mean, if I have to pinpoint in Southeast Asia, the concentration of doing commercial payments using wallet is in China. So now in the last slide as well as this slide, you see that every payment has got a pair, every payment has got a beneficiary, and there are one or more sponsors who operates the network. The prepaid or the credit or the debit, these are being run by entities like Visa, MasterCard, JCB, Discover, Amex, UPI, and all these networks. The ACH is being run by the local countries and the governments. Okay, so everyone, all these networks, they're doing one particular thing. They fulfills the payments. Okay, they make sure they're efficient and they're secure. And the most important thing is that it reaches the beneficiary in time. It's not like today you make the payment and the payment actually reaches the beneficiary something like 1 week or 1 month down the line. There are cases like that. There are some cases like that, but then there are kind of significant improvements of efficiencies which are coming on in this field through the innovations. So going to the next slide, let me define the entities. Anam, next slide, please. Going to the entities. So here, from this slide onwards, we start off with the actuals of payments, what we are going to discuss to the remaining part of the session. So there are 3 entities. What I have already introduced you to the pair who buys the goods and services, the beneficiary who receives the payment in the exchange of goods and services. And the third and the most important entity are the ones who kind of go ahead and set the rules, operate the network, and fulfills the payments. Those are basically the middle part, which is the orange part of the slide, which is called the networks. Now, every innovation is happening through this network, with the network, and along with the network. So with this, I come to the end of the first session. So I'll give a couple of minutes for people to ask questions. If you have any questions at this point of time, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me the questions, please.
There is a legal aspect in the payment process, like, cross-border payments are driven by some government rules. So probably you would touch upon it later part of the discussion.
Yeah, so good point. I mean, excellent point. Yeah, there's something called the regulators. The middle part, the network themselves are regulator. On top of that, the government regulations and mandates also kind of supersedes some of them. So therefore, the middle part is the one who sets up the rules of the payments. So if you listen to, if you have heard me saying that these are the guys who are setting the rules, and the rules are all being set in keeping the regulations and the implications of the regulations in mind. We will come there. I mean, obviously, may not be in a big way in this particular session today, but I have got a complete course on your regulations and compliances. Like, what does that payment networks need to do in order to go ahead and be a payments enabler from making a payment from a payer to a beneficiary? Any other questions?
Yeah, basically, Ranjit here. So I wanted to ask, you'll be covering on how these people make money, right?
That is a part of the second session, Ranjit, which is not a part of this free session today. Yeah, I have a session, and I'll come to it later, Ranjit, saying that, like, what are the things we have got after the session today?
So you are talking about the interchange fee and everything, right?
Interchange is just one of them. Is just one of them. More than interchange, there are entities like there are top-ups on top of interchange, routing, then your MDR. So I'll come to those. In the third part of the presentation.
Hi, Deb. This is Sukumar. I have one question.
Yeah.
When you talk about payer beneficiary in the screens, generally the person who is sending the amount is sender and the receiving is receiver. And the thing is, when you are talking about payer, the opposite term for payer is payee. Why you didn't mention like payee and you are mentioning like beneficiary? Is there any reason behind that?
Good that someone observed it. In the payments world, we always call a payer as a person who pays, and the beneficiary is a person who benefits from the money.
Can't we call it as payee?
In the banking term, it's called payee. In our payments term, we call it a beneficiary. We always call it a beneficiary. Because he's the one who's getting benefited by the payment.
Perfect. Generally, we can call it as originator and beneficiary like that.
You can put it, see, basically you can put it as any names, as long as you understand like whom you're implying. But since this is a kind of a, this is a kind of a payments orientation program. So therefore I thought I am going to use the terminologies which our industry, which is the payments industry uses.
Oh, okay, perfect, no issues. And one more thing I have, when you are talking about usage, you mentioned about in Europe, it's like PSD or something like that. What is that?
PSD2. See, PSD2 is basically the strong, I mean, it is a kind of a regulation which has come in, which is a strong customer authentication plus a lot of other things. Okay, which also has got a kind of an open banking thing, AISP and PASP. So I have them in one of my later sessions about what is open banking and how does open banking play a role in, disintermediating networks. So as I told you, in one of the things is that, like, the entities which I have already defined you now, the same entities remains. But today, with the amount of innovations which are happening on top of it, there are a lot of people who are trying to bypass the interchange, bypass the network, who are trying to bypass or who are trying to provide a lot of values on top of things. So therefore, like a lot of those things are going to be mapped onto this.
Okay, I assume that the PSD2 is nothing but a regulatory, correct?
As of now, you can
Regulatory.
assume that it's regulatory. As of now, you can assume that it's regulatory. See, payments organization, payments world is extremely regulated and is compliance specific. So one of the regulations which has come up in Europe is basically PSD2, which also actually caps on the interchange fees of debit as well as your credit. One of the things of PSD2 is the capping of debit and credit. One of the things is basically your schemes and networks. I mean, what is the scheme and what is the network that you're going to use? It's not that like you're using a Visa card, which means you have to go through the Visa network. The scheme and processing can be different.
Yes. And in the
Okay.
last slide, you mentioned like ACH networks like that.
Right.
What is the mean? What is meant by that? I didn't
Sorry?
understand. What is meant by that? Networks in the sense? Is clearing
Scheme and
systems or
processing are two different things.
yeah?
No.
Is it a
Scheme
clearing
and
system?
processing are two different things.
Okay.
I think we will come to that later.
Sure.
The one is basically the way in which you're making the payment, and one is the network which is processing the payment. So the network which is processing the payment is the one who does the clearing. So what I said is that it's not mandatory that you're using a Visa scheme. That means that you have to go through the Visa network. You can choose another network.
Okay. Perfect. I understand.
So that's called a low-cost routing, or as we call it. I mean, we'll come to it later. Anything else before we move ahead?
Yeah, hi. I
right.
have a question.
So Anam, let's go to the next section.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me? Hello, this is
Yeah,
Maddie.
who's this?
This is Maddie, Mazrima Paul.
Hi, Maddie. Yeah,
So
Maddie. Tell me.
I wanted to know about the barriers of entry to this industry. If you're covering that forward, then I'll skip it now. Is it audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Barriers is basically that's an extremely forward-looking question, and it's good that Maddie, like you're thinking about it. But we have that, like, what are the kind of barriers to this thing in this industry, but not in this session today.
Okay, great.
Okay, Maddie.
Hi, Deb. I have one quick question.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Deb. This is Amrit here.
Hi, Amrit. Hi. Good evening.
Good
Good
evening.
to see you here.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I remember most of us are moving towards digital payments, but the old method of transaction using checks, I feel, is a positive note, especially when you have overdraft capabilities. Like I give a check to you, and then even if I don't have money, I can call the bank and ask them to push it forward so that I can pay the bank later. But what happens when transactions come in? We can't do that, because if you don't have money in your bank, you just can't push it forward, right?
Amrit, just hold your question for 2 more minutes. I'm coming there. I exactly have this answer to this question, maybe about 3 slides later. Okay. Amrit, can you hear me?
Yes, understood.
Just hold your question for 3 more slides. I mean, I think I have it in my 4th or the 5th slide from here. Okay.
Are there any more questions?
Okay, if you, I think let's move ahead.
Move ahead, right? Okay.
So the second part of this presentation is to introduce you with the terminologies. Some of these terminologies are kind of very basic, I think, which you need to know at this point of time. Like the first one of that is BIN. The full form of BIN is called the bank identification number. If you all pull out your credit cards from your wallet or from your pocket, the first 6 digits of your credit card is nothing but the bank identification number. So it is like, for example, like you might have a ICICI Bank card and 2 ICICI Bank credit cards, let's say, which is a different product. So quite often you will see like if both of them are Visa branded or MasterCard branded credit card, a Visa brand starts off with a number, the numeric 4, and a MasterCard starts off with numeric 5. That's how like the BIN gets identified. And the first 6 digits is the BIN, which defines like whether it's a credit card or a debit card or a prepaid card or a gift card. The next couple of digits like shows its product code, which is it's a platinum or a signature or whatever card it is. So this is something which is the unique thing which is being generated by the card association. So whenever you want to start issuing a Visa or a MasterCard, BIN application is the zeroth thing that you need to do in order to get this identification number, apart from all the legal and the regulatory formalities which each one of these the schemes have got, and the country legal things depending upon wherever you are. So this is the first and foremost thing that you need to do, is to figure out, like, I mean, to do this application. So what Visa and MasterCard can do and understand, let's say, like if it's ICICI Bank BIN, so whichever part of the world you're going and transacting in, so the acquirer, I mean, again, I'm actually jumping the guns. The merchant's bank doesn't know who's your bank. So therefore, they send it to the card association, who in turn sends it to the right issuing bank. So ICICI Bank will have a BIN, which is through which the network can identify this is a kind of a card. This is a card which is being issued by ICICI Bank, which is based out of India, and which is basically the Indian rupee currency, INR currency. Okay, so that's very unique about this. The next slide, like what is the message format? We have been talking, like the network entities are talking to each other, the banks are talking to each other, the merchants are talking to the network is talking to the issuer, and so on and so forth. So ISO 8583 is the messaging format. I've given a sample of this messaging format, but I won't go into the details of it. This messaging format in this course, we have got that in a detailed course, like what is each one of these and what each one of these implies. So what you need to know, the messaging format, the takeaway from this is like ISO 8583 is the messaging format. XML version of ISO 8583, which is 20/22, is something which is slowly taking over the legacy message formats. But again, 20/22 is nothing but the ISO message formats being actually put into XML format. Now, just one observation in this particular slide. If you look at the table in the leftmost side, which says that position 2, 3, 4. So all these things are the identification of this particular message. Like what are the kind of contents of each one of those messages? There's nothing which is called a position 1, if you notice it. Okay, you'll see a lot of skips in between also, but there's nothing called position 1. So just to give you the answer to what this position 1 is nothing but basically the type of message which is coming in. It can be a purchase message, it can be a reversal message, it can be a refund message. Everything is like a kind of a numeric array of this particular entities, which cumulatively forms the message which is being transmitted from one entity to the other. The third one, which I think brings us to the real digital world, is the tokenization. Anam, can we go to the next slide, please? The tokenization thing. Now, this is something which is very important at this point of time. I'm not going to tell you the details of what tokenization is in this particular session today, but what you need to know, tokenization is a process through which the original card numbers are never passed on to a transaction. So all these days, we have seen that the card number, whether you do a transaction on the internet, or whether you do a transaction on the POS or the mobile, you will have the card number, the 16-digit card number in case of Visa and MasterCard, and 15 digits in case of your Amex, which is being passed on into the network. So now this is being replaced by another 16 digits. Okay, so this is which we call as a digital identifier. The idea is that like this can be limited to a specific mobile device or an e-commerce merchant, or basically it also can be renewed based on the number of purchase transactions before it goes ahead and expires. So what you need to take away, this tokenization is a pretty standard term, because again, whether it's Visa or whether it's Master, whether it's Amex, it's all interoperable, and all these being standards are being set by an organization which is called EMVCo. So I think that is going to be your takeaway. So all you need to remember is that your 16-digit PAN number, the card number, is being replaced by another 16-digit number, which is unidentifiable to the hackers and the fraudsters. Okay, and these are being generated by the scheme itself. Anam, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so this is a term, I think if anyone Googles today, this is a pretty hot term today. I thought like this shouldn't be a part of this. This is not a part of the basic payments training. But again, I thought of including this is click to pay. Click to pay is kind of replacing this is a part of the EMVCo's mandate again of the secure remote commerce standards and the industry standard which is getting replaced for all this 3D secure, because the 3D secure is something which you see that every different card schemes and card association has got their own 3D secure. Like, what do you mean by 3D secure? Let me quickly run through it. I think all of you have done it, but you probably wouldn't know it by the name. That every time you transact on a web, you will see that, like a kind of a second factor authentication which comes in, which might be in some terms of a password, which be in terms of a OTP. So the second factor authentication is something which happens here. And those are the things which is what we call is the 3-dimensional security. So all the payment service providers and gateways are now getting together, like the Amex, the Visa, MasterCard, Discover, all the main ones. And they're also including the biggest acquirers, payment gateways, and the issuers to support these things. So what it does is that now onwards, every e-commerce site you go to, you will see a separate button, which is called Click to Pay. And once you enroll your card in Click to Pay, every time once you just put that in, you have to just put in a password and your this thing, and your transaction will go through. So the convenience of this is that in every new website, you don't have to create a profile. You don't have to put your card. You don't have to put all the extra details and etc. All those things. I mean, if you have used Visa Checkout and this thing, MasterPass, I think you would have definitely have the experience of how this works. Is that where all these cumbersome all these 16 lines or 15 lines or 14 lines or even at the minimum 5 or 6 lines of data which you have to physically enter is something which is pretty painful, and those are getting slowly being replaced. So Click to Pay is the latest of those standards, which is being, again, the standards are being set up by EMVCo so that things are interoperable. So with that, we come to the end of the terminology. So I will leave it again to the open questions, like if you have any questions at this stage for me. I think I've confused everyone, right? With starting from the bin to ISO 8583 to tokenization. But these are the terms like which have been there. I mean, you need to understand this before we move forward from here. So feel free to ask me any questions here.
Hello, sir. Amit this side.
Amit, hi.
Hi, sir. So I have one query. So when you talk about Click to Pay, so for example, I have a Click to Pay option enabled both on Flipkart and Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So I using for the first time when I'm using Click to Pay, I have to enter my card details, right?
One time you have to enter.
So I have
one time you have to see, you basically, so, go ahead.
I'll just complete it. So I have entered my card details and everything, and I did shopping in the Amazon. Now, next time when I go to Flipkart, I will just click on Click to Pay, and then I will just enter my password and I can make the payment. Like any other website, wherever click.
Yes.
So that is only my question, sir.
That is correct. So the entire thing removes the friction. See, the problem has been like a lot of these merchants are seeing that the visitors who are coming to their sites, they're not becoming shoppers. They're doing things and eventually like they're just abandoning their shopping cart and they're moving out, because not everyone is comfortable in giving out their card numbers in all the different websites. But again, a website actually which displays like Visa Checkout or MasterPass or Click to Pay, I think like customers also have got the confidence of entering that single password because they know they're not entering any card related specific personally identifiable information, PII data and card data into that particular site. So which makes them feel safe.
So this data are being stored by schemes itself, right? Not by any merchants.
No. It's not being stored by merchants. It's being stored by schemes.
Okay.
So suppose I am a merchant, I have an website. So there is a customer who comes to my website, and when the time comes that he has to make the payment, at that point of time, the page that opens is actually the intermediate, that the party who is actually making the transfer. Suppose Visa. So in that website, the person who is the buyer is giving his card detail, but in my system, that is I'm a merchant, in my system, what comes is actually the tokenized version of that card, right?
Not always, Sanjay, not always. So tokenization is something. See, the tokenization is also a kind of a little complicated thing. It can be a kind of a scheme tokenization, or it can be an acquirer tokenization. Okay. So in case of acquirer tokenization, acquirer actually stores it in a local HSM. That once you enter the card for the first time, he says like store this card, and he will actually, if you say yes, so they'll hash code the whole thing, and they will store it in their HSM system. Okay. And the next time when you come in, when you shop in that particular site, what you are going to find out is that they are displaying that card which is always being done. Only thing is that they are not putting in the CVV, because as per the scheme regulations, you can't store the CVV. Even Visa and MasterCard themselves, they can't store the CVV. So CVV is something which is a very personal identifier for you. So therefore, yeah, so an extent like the payment page pops up, which may or may not be the merchant page. But then, like in case of certain websites who doesn't have an acquirer, like who does tokenization, or who doesn't subscribe to the Visa or MasterCard token services, or the Discover or the Amex token services, there like the tokens are not going to be supported. So basically you have an open card. So what happens here, Sanjay, is that click to pay is just like you see in a shop, in Amazon, that Visa is a method of payment, MasterCard is a method of payment, Amex is a method of payments. So you will see a one new box in between this thing below that shopping site, which is called click to pay. The moment you see click to pay, all you need to know is that like once you have already enrolled with click to pay, you can just enter the password and be done with it. No other information actually goes out of your goes out of your personally identifiable information.
Now,
So is
one
click to
question,
pay-
one quick question. Now, click to pay, this is a service which is given from the merchant end to the normal customer, right? Or it is a service given by the network?
It has been given by payment gateway, who sits
Payment
in
gateway.
between the merchant and the payment network.
The payment gateway. Now, when you say the normal click to pay, is so each and every consumer has to enroll him or herself for this service
One time,
right? So once he gives this all the credentials in free text format, next time he don't have to give the card details, but somehow he has to know that I am giving my payment through this card. So how the normal consumer will understand this is the card which I registered with this particular merchant in previous year?
So basically, I mean, see, click to pay is not a merchant specific thing. It's a network
I
specific
got
thing.
it, but network specific thing is these services are provided by the network plus gateway, and it is supported by from the big merchants who can basically support this service. All the merchants cannot support click to pay, as per my understanding. Maybe I may be wrong.
Again, what you need to understand this is that merchants are not providing the service. Please try and understand the merchants are not providing the service.
Okay.
The services are being provided by the PSPs and the payment gateways and the acquirers. So if your acquirer, let's say, let's go to some very specific examples. If your acquirer is this thing, let's say like Global Payments. If your payment gateway is CyberSource, CyberSource can provide this as a payment method. And if your acquirer is providing CyberSource at the gateway, then automatically click to pay becomes one of your methods of payments. Now you can choose and tell the acquirer on the payment gateway whether you're keen to accept click to pay or whether you're not keen to accept click to pay. Okay, but you don't have to do anything for that. I mean, you can only tell him like, hey, just remove this option, or you just keep this option. So therefore, click to pay is a kind of a service which has been provided by the network, which in turn is being provided by the gateways, and merchants have got the options whether to take it or not to take it.
Yeah, means basically these are basically the APIs which is published by the gateway.
They will probably go there in terms of APIs. I think we are kind of jumping the gun on a lot of other participants. So, but just to quickly answer you this thing, Shomo. So then again, the APIs are being consumed not by the merchant. It's being consumed by the payment gateway or the payment service provider. The entire thing is that the merchant using the payment gateway is the entity which consumes these APIs which are being provided by the network. The merchant doesn't consume anything. So moment you see the difference. It actually leads me to a very good point at this point of time, which I wanted to emphasize to the entire crowd over here today, is that the moment you have a merchant who's trying to get a payment method into his site. Say, for example, I'm devgiri.com and I'm a grocery store. Okay. I am saying that payment gateway, you give me Visa, Master, and all those things. But whereas I'll say that, okay, fine, for Paytm and for all these other things, I'll do it myself. But the moment I do it myself, my compliance overhead goes up. Because what happens is that I have to be compliant. I have to do all my PCI DSS, etc., etc., etc. I mean, which a lot of these terminologies can be very difficult for a lot of participants. But then, all the overheads of doing this compliance and regulatory stuff comes on my head. Why should I even do that? I'll just ask my payment gateway to do it for me, right?
Yes, yes.
I mean, as we go into some of my later paid modules, like you'll see, like the idea of starting a payment business and who makes what money, and and what ideally as a merchant you should do, what ideally as a payment gateway you should do. These are kind of, you need to have a very clear understanding that, what is your role and what is the payment gateway's role and what is the acquirer's role and what is the network's role. So that bifurcation has to be done very clearly. And whenever you're starting a payment business, even you're a merchant, you need to have that very clearly in your mind, because otherwise you're going to fail. Otherwise you'll see like something as bad has come and hit you.
Devgiri, a novice question. So when it comes to, from the user's perspective, that like one who is making the payment, will this click to pay like a system? I mean, will the network will always be listening to me depending upon the devices I use to identify who I am, in order to ascertain that yes, there is a bona fide and the password that is coming through is associated with this particular user only and nothing and no one else.
Yes, the network will be actually authenticating you
at all. So it has to know where I am at any given point in time.
Yes, that's basically a kind of a step ahead that you're saying, that from which site it is coming. It will also check whether the site has got click to pay as a payment method, which is being invoked, or probably the payment gateway will do that authentication and the network will actually do the authentication for your password to authenticate you that you're the right person who's claiming you are to be.
Okay, just curious to know how it goes about doing that, like figuring out who I am.
That part of it is like, I mean, this click to pay is a kind of a topic itself in my detailed payment session.
Okay.
Goha. Okay.
All right.
I mean, it's a very happening thing. It's a very, very, very happening thing. I think whoever are familiar with e-shopping here in India, I think Flipkart and Paytm has already done it. So if you don't have any other questions, let's go to the starting point of modern payments ecosystem. So one question I have for all of you now is, do you see anything which is digital over here? Anything which has come up is digital? I mean, without using the word called digital, did you see like anything which has come up digital? Or till now you don't find anything which is digital? Okay, fine. I'll give a couple of more slides before I ask that question back to the team again. So what is it? So before we start this whole thing, I'll give you a little story. Okay, and I'll give you a trivia also during this whole story. So I told you in my payments roadmap, like payments innovation started way back in 1950. Okay, so who was that? Can anyone tell me like who did the first payment innovation in this world? Okay, if you don't know it, it's a company called Diners Club. And I think like all of you know the story of, I mean, the brand name called Diners Club. So what did they do? What is the value proposition which Diners Club bought in? So Diners Club gave a charge card to a few hundred people for whom they can actually use the card now and pay the bill at the end of the month. So for example, like they gave a piece of plastic and said that, okay, you swipe this plastic, you sign on the piece of paper and say that, yes, it's my payment, and you pay me back at the end of the world. So at the end of the month. So it's basically a charge card. So now he has given a card to some people, a few hundred people, but the card needs to be accepted. So what did he do? He went ahead and signed up with some 13 restaurants to accept that in the Manhattan area in New York. Okay. So if you go to this, now the proposition increases. So you have a card in your pocket. If you go to this 13 restaurants, they will accept this particular card. So which means that if you have to use this card in this restaurants, you don't have to pay them cash anymore. The authorization that you did that you will be paying at the end of the month is enough for me, for you to go ahead and have your meal. So what happened as a part of it? Cardholders love this convenience, and restaurants also like the convenience of more sales, right? Because cardholder also said, oh, okay, cool. So I don't have to carry a bundle of cash in my pocket. And restaurant guys also say, oh, okay, fine. Since people doesn't have to pay, people are actually eating more. I mean, the normal tendency of a card, even if you go to with a card in the pre-COVID times, I won't say in the COVID times, to a particular shop, you would have done a lot of this unnecessary shoppings, right? And that would have increased the bill, and that would have actually made the merchant happy. So how did it move forward? So this was in 1950. In 1951, Diners Club actually signed up with 330 restaurants. From 13 restaurants, he went up to 330 restaurants. And from some few hundred of people to whom he gave cards, he started giving cards to 42,000 different cardholders. Okay. So obviously now his business started expanding. So 5 years from then, okay, almost about in 1956, 57, there was about 54 millions of transactions which has happened through these cards in all over North America. So what he has done is that he has gone and spread this thing. So what is the takeaway from here? So he actually did a kind of a successful growth on getting enough cardholders and merchants who wants to do business with each other. Okay, so that again, the kind of the payer and the beneficiary concept, who wanted to do the merchant with each, who wanted to do the business with each other, focusing on one local, which is the Manhattan, and one type of service, which is fine dining, and subsidizing one group of people, the cardholder. Now the question comes in: is this electronic payments? Yes or no?
No.
Why?
Because this is the main thing here is the faith and authorization and belief. It can be anything. It can be any.
What is okay? Fine. Let's step two steps back. What's the definition of a digital payment? I think this is something which is very important for everyone to understand now. Like what is
cash payments payment? Actually, normal cash payments.
Cash payments are called digital payments.
No.
Sorry, I didn't get you. Come again.
The example what you gave of diners.
Are you telling me like cash payments are digital payments?
No, I'm not saying cash payments are digital payment, but the example what you are giving, that Diners Club and everything, where the business started, everything at that point of time, we don't have so much of.
Okay, what's your Shomo? What's your the definition of digital payment? I mean, I'll tell my definition of digital payment maybe later on this thing and in the next few slides. But what is your definition of digital payment? I can see a hand up from Maddie also. So Maddie, your turn comes after this.
Digital payments, everywhere is digital payments.
No. What's the definition of digital payments? It's a crystal clear question. What's your definition of digital payments?
Which is not a cash payments actually.
So is this a cash? So was the Diners Club thing a cash payment?
Yes, it was a cash.
No, it was not a cash payment. It was basically you're swiping a card, and you're authorizing it. Like, okay, fine, merchant, you give the card to the Diners Club, you give this authorization to Diners Club, you will get paid, and he's paying the Diners Club at the end of the month. So why is it not? I mean, there's no cash in between, right?
I thought it's a quite ancient history, so I didn't anticipate that we have that all this computers and everything were there at the time. So
yes. So basically the first ever digital payment, I mean, whatever the hypes which have been created about digital payments came to this world way back in 1950. So one part of your definition is correct, that you have wherever cash is not directly being transferred from place A or pair A to beneficiary A, that itself is called a digital payment. Because you're digitally actually paying someone for the goods and against the goods and services that he's providing. Is that correct?
Yes.
So therefore it's a digital payment now. You agree with me, Shomo?
Yes.
Thank you. Next one, sorry, I saw a few more hands. Rohit, Maddie, Praveen, huh?
Yeah, Praveen, yes. Yeah, so I think in a digital format, there has to be modes which are, or maybe the echelons that we have created. I mean, from a network or a payee to, the beneficiary. All these are interacting through a digital medium. It's not like, a physical transfer is happening. So it is important that you need to be onboarded on a digital platform. I mean, it can be in an e-commerce payment gateway, or let's say, or the pay is actually operating through an issued card. So it's a plastic. So I mean, all these many players that we have, or the interacting points, those are there. These are on a digital platform. There's nowhere a physical transfer happening. So the modes have to be electronic. Then we can call,
Good,
you know,
good.
it is a digital.
Very, very, very good point, Praveen. Very, very, very good
Yeah.
point. I know, like this is what you do day in, day out. But so basically, over here, just to explain to everyone, there's a front-end digitization which has happened, but the back-end digitization has not happened. So the front-end digitization in terms of payer paying the beneficiary is now happening, happened. But what, to answer to Praveen's this thing, to just to elaborate on what Praveen said, is that look, I mean, there has not been a kind of a situation where this thing, like, you know, like the entire thing has been happening in an automated way, and which is kind of invisible to you or the merchant or everything. No, that was definitely not the case. So what I call that is basically the starting point of the modern payment ecosystem. That has been the starting point. So a lot of you who are kind of slightly this thing towards 40 or 45 years old in this presentation today, I'm definitely sure you would have gone and used your credit cards where there was no POS. I mean, in the early 2000 days, before 2000, in the late 90s, you would have seen that there was a swipe machine, which used to take an imprint of the card and where you used to sign. That's also a digital payment. But again, the entire ecosystem was not digital. Now, what is different now, and this is where I'm going to take you through this slide, is that this is the starting point of the modern payment ecosystem and how the payment ecosystem is being configured now. So the modern payment card ecosystem makes it possible for a general purpose payment card. What I say is a general purpose payment card is it can be a Master, it can be UnionPay, it can be a Visa, Discover, JCB, Amex, any card to be accepted anywhere, okay, by any store. And the method is the same all over the world, and every authorization is being authorized, every transaction is being authorized in terms of some milliseconds. Okay, so what are the entities? Let's try to understand this. This is going to be a foundational slide for a lot of you who's going to come to the payments industry. So you go and swipe your card at the merchant location. Now, there are some terminologies, new terminologies, which I'm going to introduce here. Okay, from the merchant, every merchant is tagged to a bank, and every card holder is also tagged to another bank. The merchant's bank is called the acquiring bank. The cardholder's bank is the issuing bank. Now, there are certain banks who acts like where Praveen works. He works with ICICI. ICICI is both an acquirer as well as an issuer. Okay. So please remember, like all these schemes, they don't work with merchants. They don't work with any other entities other than the banks. The entire thing, the entire relationship of the associations are only directly with the banks. So now here, what you need to know and what you need to take away from this slide is that like the merchant, his bank is called the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank is the one who provides the entire acquiring infrastructure and the POS and all the other hardwares and the softwares, everything to their respective merchants. Okay. The issuing bank is the one who provides the cards to the cardholder. They also have got their own ecosystem systems, like which I'm going to come in the next slide, like what those things are. And the card association is a facilitator between the acquirer and the issuer to authorize the transaction. For example, I can go ahead and use an ICICI card way back in like somewhere in Manhattan. So, I mean, let's say like the acquiring bank, the merchant's bank over there is Bank of America. And my issuing bank here is the ICICI bank here in India. So do you think like Bank of America will know ICICI Bank and they will directly transfer the thing to ICICI Bank? The answer is no. They will go to the network. And if you recall in the past part, like I have defined something which is called a bin. So once the transaction message is being carried through, like it has got the bin, and the bin which identifies that this is the issuing bank to which I should go ahead to authorize this transaction. So therefore, the modern payment ecosystem enables any card issued from anywhere of any brand to be used by a merchant who accepts that particular brand. Clear? And the card association is the central authorization, clearing, and settlements of the fund from the cardholder's account into the merchant's account. Remember, everything is still the same. I mean, in a normal case, he would have paid cash to the merchant and he would have taken the goods and services. Here, what would happen is that you would actually pay through the card. Once that little piece of paper, which in our terminologies, we call it a sales draft. I mean, a lot of you call it charge slip. Please don't call it charge slip. Charge slip is the wrong terminology. It's called a sales draft. Once you have the sales draft, once you're authenticated and you promise to pay, like that is the time when the merchant comes and goes and gives you the goods and services, and you get out of the shop. But remember, in that case also the merchant needs to get paid, just as you do in case of a cash payment. Clear to everyone? Next slide, Anam.
So Devgiri, Ranjit here, so what you're really saying is that the merchant gets the money from Visa and Visa collects the money from ICICI Bank.
Correct. So basically what happens, Ranjit, is that like the transactions get authorized by ICICI Bank. Okay. Once ICICI Bank authorizes it, the authorization response goes back to Visa, and Visa will send the authorization response to the acquirer. Okay. And acquirer will say the merchant that, okay, fine, there's a green light that you can go ahead and accept this transaction. You can give the goods and services. So now how the fund works, or how the fund transfer works is that, like at the end of the day, when merchant closes the batch, I'm running the gun a little bit. I'm jumping the gun a little bit for the benefit of everyone. So when the batch is being closed, like the batch goes back to Visa. So Visa will create the clearing files and send it to the issuing bank. The issuing bank will, the money which we has earmarked before from the my ICICI Bank account, now he'll settle that with Visa. So Visa will go ahead and take out all the fees and charges and everything and send it to the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank will also take his fees and charges and sends it to the merchant. So basically that's what, like someone told me, the question of interchange, that's why the interchange and MDR, all those things comes up. So for example, like the merchant sells for X number of dollars, he's not going to get X number of dollars for this card transaction. There will be like something in between which is going to get deducted. Clear, Ranjit?
Yeah.
Okay. Next slide. What are the entities in the ecosystem? So you know who are the participants in the ecosystem. Now let's look at the entities within this ecosystem. The customer being at the center of the whole thing. You have got the issuer. With the issuer, you have got something which is called the card processor. The issuer is the one like who provides these cards from the card processing system. You have got the merchants, which is basically the acquirer, which is tagged with the acquirer. Acquirer is the bank. The bank can have its own merchant processor on which his terminals and everything are onboarded. You have got something which is called a terminal manufacturer. The terminal manufacturers are all these Verifone, Ingenico, and all these things. Even though there have been a lot of transformations which are happening in this place, Veriphones and Ingenicos are not going to exist in the format in which they're existing till now. And the other guy is the card network, which is a Visa, MasterCard, and all these guys who are doing this transaction, this thing, you know, like from one side, from the merchant side to the issuing side, as well as back and forth. So these are the entities who actually completes the entire card ecosystem. Clear? So this is the takeaway. This is a very important slide. This actually sets up the foundation of this entire payments, thing, like what we are going to see later on. Now, next slide.
No, Devgiri, just go back to the slide. If you can just go back, yeah. So a merchant processor and a card processor, just explain that.
Merchant processor. Okay, so good point. I'll give you the name of the company. I think that will make it easy for you. So First Data, Global Payments, these are all merchant processors. In their original format. Now all these guys have gone ahead and like merged with another issuer processor and stuff like that. And the card processor is something like your FIS. If you look at your FIS, FSS, and all these companies, which are something like which we call as the card processors. The terminal manufacturers are the Verifone and the Ingenicos of the world. Is that clear, Ranjit?
Yeah. So
okay.
What I'm not very clear on is what does a card processor do? Because I thought, let's say, if
where is your card being hosted? Where is your card being hosted? You've got a 16-digit card number, right?
Yeah.
And you've got all the transactions and everything. Where is the card being hosted? The card processor is the one who hosts it. So this can be in-house to a bank, just in case of Citi or all these things, or it can be outsourced to a company like FIS.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Similarly, the merchant data and the merchant transactions are something which are being hosted on other terminals, which are being hosted by the acquirer. So it can be done by a merchant processor, by this third-party processor who's working on behalf of the bank, which can be a First Data or Global Payments, or it can be insourced, something like what HDFC does here in India. For ICICI, it is being outsourced to First Data. For HDFC, it is being insourced. Axis also has got it insourced. But these are all changing. Like these trends are kind of pretty much changing now these days.
So in the name of merchant processor, you just mentioned one name, Global Payments. So does it mean that Global Payments do not qualify to be in the same rank as Visa or
No, that's not a network. That's not a network. They are the ones who have got the endpoint to the networks. They're not networks. Please understand the difference between a processor and a network. Visa, MasterCard, these are networks. And these are the ones which are, the processors are the one who actually supports the merchants and creates the gateway to the merchant to the endpoints to Visa and MasterCard. Clear?
Okay.
Devgiri, a question. So, and there are like countries you have where Bitcoins are recognized. So where does that fit into this ecosystem?
Bitcoin has got a separate infrastructure.
Okay.
This is what we are calling about as a card payment, card and e-commerce payments. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Bitcoin is a slightly different infrastructure.
Devgiri, just one question. Suppose, I go with an ICICI bank card and the merchant whatever is also with the ICICI. So when I swipe my card, the card is definitely on me. Means whatever that banking logic is.
On us.
So does it again?
That is called on us. So on us transaction doesn't go to the network in our country. At least in India, at least it doesn't go to the network. So see, every acquirer processor would have his own BINs, the bank identification number for his issuer. Okay. So moment he sees like that kind of a card has come in, he won't send it to the endpoint. He will send it to his own issuing system. That is called an on us transaction.
The card is on me, on us or not on us. So in that case, does the merchant pay a lesser kind of call it commission or charge or whatever? Usually
MDR. The terminology is called MDR, merchant discount rate. That depends from bank to bank. Mostly no. But in certain countries, in certain continents, even though you're doing an honest transaction, it is mandated that the honest transaction also has to go through the network.
Okay. So are there any companies or are there already, I'm sure, people would have been startups already are there. Say for example, then it makes a lot of sense in order to eliminate that whatever that merchant side of your diagram that you had shown. Let's say then the credit card issuer becomes the issuing bank or the FI or the issuer becomes a primary kind of thing. And other guys are all secondary, and even like in US or elsewhere or UK, even the stores, they also issued their own credit card because they are also FIs, registered FIs or so. So are there already companies who are like functioning kind of merchant come acquiring and all that kind of thing, selling, shelling out or giving those POS terminal instead of coming from a bank? These guys are giving out POS terminals everywhere, saying that okay, we will run this bank side or merchant side of thing, and we will integrate into Visa, MasterCard, or what you call the networks.
You have to be sponsored by a bank, Jina. I told you in some slides back that Visa and MasterCard won't work with third-party independent entities. You have to be like, they will only do settlements with banks. They're not going to settle with third-party entities. To answer the other part of your questions, whatever you're talking about, the store cards.
So for example, now Paytm has given like, all those POS terminals.
Paytm is a bank now. Paytm is a payments bank now. The payments bank is authorized, so it has got a banking license under RBI.
Okay.
But you wouldn't see a MobiKwik. But you wouldn't see a MobiKwik terminal. MobiKwik is not a bank under the RBI.
No, because to get a payment back, I remember while I was in TechM, we actually applied for a payment bank license. We also got it, but finally we returned it, saying that our Movo Money didn't want to focus on all that one, so we don't want to start a bank. That I think it's just like a month's application, and invariably whoever has applied always has got it. So so is there an opportunity exist likes of Paytm, or tomorrow maybe Devgiri and Jena and company or something like that, we built up and replace the entire acquiring bank and merchant side of the things?
But you need to have some kind of a license, Jena. Without license, you can't do it.
No, but a payment bank license is now on demand. You can apply to RBI and all that and get it.
So basically what you can do is that you have to only work with debit cards. You can't work. So Paytm Payments Bank cannot give out credit cards. So that is against the
No. I'm the credit card will come from the issuing bank also. All I'm saying is that
you can provide the infrastructure. You can provide the infrastructure. Yes. You can create a third-party infrastructure and you can actually provide that as a hosted service. Yes, there are companies who are doing it.
This acquiring bank and all that one, the acquiring bank and the network, between them they share that MDR, isn't it? Because the issuing bank doesn't have to do anything with MDR.
No. I think we are jumping 1 second. No, MDR is a different thing. MDR is being just the acquirer's income. I think let's take this presentation now, Jenna. Send this mails to me, or probably have a one-on-one with me, and I'll explain to you. MDR is just between the acquirer and the merchant. So interchange plus the merchant fees is what makes up MDR. So interchange is being reimbursed by the acquirer to the issuer. So on top of that, whatever the acquirer takes is something which is there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, we'll have a one-on-one.
We'll have a one-on-one. I mean, let's go through this presentation. Just feel free to set up a time with me and I'll explain it to you. Okay. And next slide, please. So now Amrit, coming back to your this thing that what are the kind of different cards. So this slide gives you a kind of a different card. So there are 4 different kind of cards, what we see. One is the cash or the debit cards, which are pay now products, which is ideally that you need to have that account balance in your account through to which this particular card is being tagged. So therefore, those are the ones like which has to have been completely funded. Credit cards are kind of pay later products. So again, the checks and controls are happening against the credit limit which is being left for you. Prepaid cards are something which is paid before products. Funds are available in advance and can be used later. Travel cards, FX cards are the ideal examples of that. And corporate card is a completely different species. Here I've said the corporate cards is a different line item over here, because the corporate card is the entire life cycle works very differently. So these are the 4 different kinds of cards that are associated with the digital accounts. Next slide. So here is basically like how a 4-party model works in a store, which I have already described in my last to last slide, how this whole thing works. So this gives you a kind of a pictorial representation of that, where the cardholder presents a card to the store. The acquirer sends the authorization request to the issuing bank. But again, the acquirer doesn't know the issuer. So he has to send it to the network. The network is the one who sends the authorization request to the issuer. The issuer approves or declines the authorization request. Ranjit, we were talking about the card management system. The card management system has got the details on whether he has got the credit limit, whether it's a debit card, whether he has got money in the bank account. And that's how like he kind of authorizes, approves or declines the transaction. So he then sends it back to the network. The network forwards the auth response to basically to the acquirer. Acquirer forwards it to the merchants. Merchants receives and responds and processes the transaction. Remember this diagram. This is again a very foundational diagram which you have to remember in this training course, which is going to be the foundation of how the payment system works and how the payment systems integrates and interact with each other. Any questions?
What is the end-to-end time? The typically max and min?
Within the network, it's actually 0.015 milliseconds. I mean, again, the bottleneck comes in like when you are having this POS machines and everything. The POS machines are dialed onto the acquirer through either through a lease line or through a kind of a point of presence or through a kind of a dial-up. That's where the delay happens. Within the network, is 0.015 milliseconds to 2 milliseconds.
So this network is a dedicated network, like its own optical fibers, separate from the public networks?
What, the scheme network?
No, the network. I mean, like
which network? So there are 2 networks. One is the point of this thing, the POS to the acquiring system, and once the acquiring system sends it to the Visa and MasterCard, that's a separate network.
Yes,
so
the one
network?
acquiring point to the Visa and MasterCard section, and
that's a proprietary network. Each one of them has got. Both of them have got different architectures. Both of them has got a Visa has got a central OVN, MasterCard has got a hub and spoke system.
Okay.
Yeah. So the architectures are very different.
Devgiri, between the acquirer and network, who makes more money?
I will take that in one of my other sessions, Jenna. Interesting question. But okay, as of now, issuing is a more profitable business. But acquiring also is a profitable business. There are reasons for that. To why it is a profitable business also. But if you actually ask me point blank, like who makes more money, issuing, I would say, is a more profitable business.
Okay.
Okay. So Anam, yeah.
Amriti, I have a quick question.
Hmm.
When you say corporate card, I have a bit of a confusion on that, because when I work for a company, and instead of using my credit card because I'll be charged interest, they'll give me a corporate card. Is it that meaning, or is it something
Yes.
that a company will have a card to pay merchants to the bank?
See, here also the company is paying to the merchants this thing, right? So it is paying through you. So rather you are doing it on behalf of the company, where if you're buying a travel ticket or booking a travel ticket somewhere, you are going ahead and paying that from your corporate card. So it's as good as the company paying the travel portal, right? So it's a corporate to corporate. That's a kind of a different animal altogether. That's got nothing to do with all the other, personal credit card types. It's a completely different animal. And to the previous question, which my friend Jena was asking, that who makes money here, it's a kind of a very different financial model which works. It's not the same as your normal credit cards.
Devgrida, I have a very basic, elementary question, like all the banks, whoever they has got money, whether those are actually money or some numbers only.
Which one?
Suppose I am a bank. I have money, but do I really have money, or I have
everything is physical money? I mean, it's all there in kind of the books and everything, but everything is a physical money. When you come to one of my detailed course, I'll also tell you like how this physical money transfer happens between the entities through which a merchant gets paid by the acquirer. There's a physical cash movement which happens. I'll tell you where exactly that physical cash movement happens and how does the physical cash movement happens. So everything is real money, everything is real money. Nothing, nothing has been replaced. Everything has been electronified and everything has been digitalized. As I told you, like the first digital thing started off with the front end. And as Praveen has rightly said, the ecosystem was not digital. The front end was digital. Now everything is digital. So in my payments world, every single thing, when you use a card or when you do e-commerce, every single payment is a digital payment. And today we are talking so much of the cloud and everything. For here, everything is on the cloud. The Visa started the cloud way back in 1967. MasterCard started the cloud maybe a little later.
That's private cloud, actually.
It's a cloud. So the cloud is not also a kind of a new term that we are doing cloud-based payment. Hey, these schemes are doing cloud-based payments for donkey's years now.
Yes. No, regarding my previous question. So if it is actually everything boils down to cash, then suppose ICICI, I am making a payment in New York using a card that was issued by my ICICI India, then how my money, cash, is going from ICICI India's vault to the vault of Bank of America?
That is exactly what, I told you in one of my advanced sessions, I have that physical cash movement. How does the physical cash movement happens? Hold these till you come to one of those very advanced sessions. Okay. Anam, next slide, please. I think this is basically the last part of it, moving plastic to web and mobile. This is where we are discussing about e-commerce. So certain things which you need to understand here is that the biggest difference between a physical and a digital channel is the consumer authentication. What is basically the consumer authentication means? The cardholder authentication, that it is like Sanjay who's paying this, and Sanjay is basically the bona fide validated owner of this particular card. And different players need to ensure that money is moved between the legitimate parties, because in the internet there are a lot of things happen. Let's say like Devgiri is a gambling site and Sanjay is holding an ICICI card. Okay, if Sanjay comes and uses the card in gambling, one of the two things might happen. Sanjay can win the gamble or Sanjay can lose the gamble. If he wins the gamble, he's happy. He just shuts off his computer and he goes off. If he loses the gamble, he says that, hey, my bank, ICICI, this is not my transaction. This is a fraudulent transaction. So keep this thought in mind. So basically, it is a very important that the money is getting physically moved between the two legitimate parties. So over here, acceptance of the card is more complex, and the merchant should authenticate the customers to accept the payment method they wish to use. Okay, it is very, very, very tricky over here. But again, this industry is kind of quite an evolved industry. It's not that it's that very bad today. So the complexity, where it arises from? here I'm going to jump the guns a little bit, is that I don't know how many of you like would heard about this concept called omni-channel commerce. Okay, so it is that a consumer which moves easily across from physical to digital channels, expecting that their account, this credential and privileges travel with them. So what do we call as these kind of payments, like all these different e-commerce payments? It can be a website. It can be a mobile phone, which is being used in a physical store where you use this QR codes and all those things, or it can be in-app payment. These are the three different kind of payments that we're talking about here. The next thing, the next slide gives you a view about the four-party model. Anam, next slide, please. The next slide gives you a view of how this four-party model works here. Again, I have this whole thing, described in my, the advanced courses. So here you have all these entities. The entities are still the same, but you have got some new different entities which are coming and sitting in between. One is the payment application, one is the payment gateway, one is the remaining part of it is still the same. The acquirer processor is the acquirer processor. The issuer processor is the issuer processor. The card association is the card association. But what you see here new is basically the payment gateway. All these things we have been talking from the first slide itself. The enablers of this whole thing, who creates the creates the integration between the merchant and the network and the acquirer to the network, are the ones which are the payment gateways. And also you have got direct gateways. There are only 3 direct gateways today in the market today, which takes you from the customers directly to the network. One is authorized.net, which we popularly call as ANET, which is a Visa product. I have worked on that extensively. One is CyberSource. Again, I have worked on that extensively. And one is the MasterCard equivalent of that, which is the MPGS, which is earlier, which was used to be called as MIGS. Okay. The integrated gateways, the third-party integrated gateways, the ones which are very, very, very popular are FTPS, ADN, WorldPay, TSYS Direct, and First Data. So all those things are the ones who plays the role. But again, behind every application, there's a kind of a secure internet connection, internet cloud through which all this connectivity happens between the payment application and the payment gateways. So going to the next slide. I'll now make you meet the new players who are coming in the new digital ecosystem, so-called like the actual concept of digital ecosystems. One is the mobile-enabled POS. I guess you could have seen a few days back, MasterCard has done a huge innovation with Axis Bank on the mobile innovation POS, where they're using the mobile phone itself as a POS. Payment gateways and voice-activated ecosystems. The new players are the network of networks. Who's the network of network? Network of network is nothing but the internet. Okay. So the network of networks, that people are of networks for making. You also have got pure intermediaries, and sorry, there's something wrong with my thing. And you also have this network intermediaries. You also have the new access points, which is the mobile payments, the online payments, and the merchant-centric schemes. The merchant-centric schemes are basically like the third-party fintechs who are creating actionable insights based on the merchant data. Those are called the merchant-centric schemes. The new methods are wallet payments, net banking, and afterpay. And the new conveniences are installment payments, pay later, and instant credit. So this is now, this slide onwards, now you are in a complete digital world. All these times you have heard that payment is digital. Payment has been happening digitally. Payment has been happening on the cloud. But now with the advent of all these different players, it's a pure play digital ecosystem. Okay. So this is going to be my last slide in the presentation. Anam, if you take me to the next slide, please. So what you can do next, as I told you, like I've introduced you to the digital payment ecosystem. So Anam has got a course along with me, which is called the Payments Journey, where you would learn all these different topics like what you learned today, plus how the industry makes money, what are disputes and chargebacks, what are the rules and regulations and compliances, what are the different recent mandates and guidelines, SRC, Click to Pay, these are all the recent mandates and guidelines. Now, the last 3 points are very interesting. How do you set up a new payments business as being a merchant, as being a payment service provider, and finally, I also take you through a hands-on innovation. So this is one course which I've already started enrolling, and this is starting in the first weekend of August. Apart from that, like how do you choose your payment gateways? Like if you want to be a merchant or if you want to be e-commerce, I have got a course on that. And I also have got some additional modules, like which is like issuing your first card, accepting your first card, and how to set up installment payments. So this is what is basically going to be the entire payments journey. And I hope, like any of you who would have gone through this particular presentation today, at least gives you some interest in knowing more about how the payment industry works, what the digital payments are all about, and how this whole ecosystem is transforming over a period of time. Okay, so if you have liked this presentation today, please send me a kind of a one-liner saying that yes, it is good, or if I'm absolutely open to hear what are the kind of different improvements I need to take over from here. And please kindly also percolate it to any other interested parties who would be interested in knowing what these payments are all about. Any last questions before we leave you guys today?
Devgiri, how long is this course held over?
The payments journey course is basically 2 days.
And it's done virtually, I would imagine.
It's all virtually, yeah.
So what about, there must be somewhere where you discuss about all the accounting entries that will happening.
Those are in this whole thing. Now, how does the four-party payment system works? Here we'll go to the four-party payment system details, including the accounting and the physical movement of money and all those things. Any other questions?
Yeah, Amrit here.
Amrit, yeah.
I have one question which you may think about is what's getting famous here is remittance cards along with payment capability, but with multi-currency options.
Yeah. That will be covered. That will be covered in issuing your first card. That's a separate module.
Oh, okay.
That's issuing your first card.
Okay.
Sir, just a question here, Praveen here.
Praveen.
Sir, you said these networks don't work with third party. And, recently there are issuers like Judo Pay, or, in India, we have one card, if you're aware, Vibhav and
yeah, they're being sponsored by a bank. They're being sponsored by a bank.
So
that is not something which is not visible.
What is
basically
the nomenclature for these guys?
So they are being sponsored by a bank. So they are actually working on, on behalf of a bank. They're not actually exposing the name of the bank, but they're working on behalf of a bank. So everywhere the bank has to be there. For the settlements, the bank has to be there.
What do we call them? I mean, they are third-party issuers. What are they?
They're fintechs. M2P, all these guys, they're all fintechs. I mean, they will say that they're doing it. Everything will be done by them. But the settlements and all those things won't happen with them. It will happen with the underlying bank.
Yeah, right.
Devgiri, the interface between the merchant and the acquiring bank is that interface something standardized?
More or less, and there are different models in which it works. The old model is basically every terminal has to be onboarded on the acquirer, and every merchant has to be underwritten separately. But the new model is that you can have fully integrated or semi-integrated terminal. Like your Payworks, CyberSource has actually gone ahead and acquired a company called Payworks. I don't know whether any one of you heard the name of Payworks, which is nothing but a payments cloud, which provides a fully integrated terminal so that like today you want to be a merchant, you can actually be a merchant today itself by doing your analytics, underwriting and everything, and by using data and everything to make sure that you're the right kind of a person who are going to come on board.
So a company like CyberSource and Payworks, they actually take the headache away from the merchant to do all this.
Yes. Even today, even today, like till some certain extent, like companies like your PayU or companies like your Razorpay, all these guys in India are also doing that.
Okay.
But only thing is that what they'll do is that once you become the merchant today, so you become a Jina merchant or a Devgiri merchant today, okay? So my transaction limits are going to be muted. So which means that I can't transact for more than 10,000 rupees a day. So as I create my credibility, my transaction limits are going to be increased.
So will you be covering this topic in?
Yeah. All those things will be there.
Okay.
So that is your accepting your first card module. There's a model over here. One is you're issuing your first card. One is you're accepting your first card. This is accepting your first card.
Okay.
All right. So thank you everyone for staying with me. We are almost at one.
Just a last question to just hold you back. Quickly, when suppose we read or hear statements like this fintech, that fintech, $1 billion or whatever, fintech or
valuation. Okay.
All those whatever term they use. So what do these fintechs actually do? Their solution, where is it fitting in? Does it fit in?
Okay, for one of the easy things,
merchants or
one of the easy things. ICICI today is recruiting merchants, right? Now there are certain kinds of merchants who are profitable, certain kinds of merchants who are unprofitable. There are certain MCCs which are profitable, certain MCCs are not profitable. In certain zones, they're profitable. Something demographic zones, say for example, in Bangalore or suburbs of Bangalore, they're profitable. But whereas between the road between the Bangalore to Chennai, they're not profitable. Okay. So all these different insights and data and all those analysis, I'm just giving you one very small example. Not this startup is going to be $1 billion startup. But these are the kind of things which the startups do, which creates incremental value to the issuing and the acquiring entities today, and who are the ones who are then this thing, creating those excess values. So that's why, like, depending upon what they're doing, their valuation kinds of keeps on going up. So if you blindly ask me, like, what is it, like, whether they're worth it, that's $1 million question. Probably as an expert, like, I have to look through like some of them. If you have someone in mind, you can actually send me a mail, Jenna, whether that's really worth it. If you're planning to acquire someone.
No, not acquire. Just wanted to know.
Yeah. So these are all variable things, Jenna. These are all variable things. It depends upon the kind of value propositions or value additions they bring onto the table. I know about a fintech who are actually doing about a network disintermediation. I mean, how do you bypass this network thing so that you don't have to pay the interchange to the network? So if that comes into existence, that will be a very valuable fintech, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All
right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So good night, good evening, good afternoon. Have a great rest of the day, participants. And it was a pleasure to host all of you here.
One thing regarding when you mentioned how to bypass this.
Can we take this in this thing? Can we take this in private, please? We have already crossed the time.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Devgiri. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope this was useful.
Thanks, Dev. Thank you.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.